One of the things I hear so many times from the various podcasts I listen to, or in just conversations with people, is that the use of paper and paperboard is killing trees and the forest. So what we really need to use is our tablets, book readers, phones, receive our bills via email, etc. This will save those trees and the forest for the future. Well, is this really true? Is paper really killing trees in the forest? Hi, I'm Jim Kohler, Sylvamo's paper professor, and I hope to show you how the use of paper and paperboard is contributing to responsible forest stewardship and helping to promote healthy and productive forest ecosystems for generations to come. I'll also talk about what is really killing the trees and the forest. So stay with me. Let's face it, great ideas start on paper. The world is educated on paper. Businesses are founded on paper. Love is expressed on paper. As well, freedom of speech and so many other things, all on paper. Although deforestation and forest degradation are problems on a global scale, the main drivers are not the forest products companies, but development pressure and agriculture expansion, at least according to the Food and Agriculture Organization. The good news for us in the Northern Hemisphere is that temperate forests are actually expanding. According to the United States Department of Agriculture and Forest Services, there are 4 major threats to our forests today, but I'll add a 5th. The first is a threat from fire and fuels. The second threat is from the spread of invasive species. The third is the loss of open space, and the fourth, unmanaged outdoor recreation. So what's the 5th? Insects. So you haven't heard me say the threats are coming from cutting of trees from the forest products industry, have you? Now, to be honest, I'm only talking about the United States and Canada. There are other threats, however, to forest in other parts of the world. So what does each threat mean? Well, let's see. The first threat is from fire and fuels. Since 2000, America has had some of our worst fire seasons in 50 years. The underlying issue is that so many of our fire-dependent ecosystems have become overgrown and unhealthy. The answer is to reduce fuels, meaning all the overgrown areas need to be thinned before the big fires break out. Where fire-dependent forests are overgrown, we've got to do some thinning, then get fire back into the ecosystem when it's safe. The second threat is from the spread of invasive species. These are species that evolved in one place and wound up in another, where the ecological controls they evolved with are missing. They take advantage of their new surroundings to crowd out or kill off native species, destroying habitat for native wildlife. I'll give you an example. Where cheatgrass takes over, the range losses forage value for deer and elk. You know, we're losing our precious heritage at the cost that is in the billions. The third threat is loss of open space. Every day America loses about 4,000 acres of open space to development. You know, that's about 3 acres per minute. And the rate of conversion is getting faster all the time. In other places, we're losing rangeland that so many plants and animals need. And where private open space is lost, recreational pressures on public lands tend to grow. That brings me to the 4th threat, that being unmanaged outdoor recreation. I'll use an example to explain what I mean. Off-highway vehicles, or OHVs, are a great way to experience the outdoors, but the number of OHVs users have just gotten huge. It grew from about 5 million in 1972 to almost 36 million in 2000. 99% of the users are careful to protect the land, but with all those millions of users, even a tiny percentage of them can cause huge damage. We've got to improve our management so we get responsible recreational use based on sound outdoor ethics. My added 5th threat is of insects. Let's face it, America was not ready for the pandemic, and it sure isn't ready for the next contagion to strike our woodlands. In the past 120 years, ferocious insects and fungi have swept across North America with frightening regularity, laying low the chestnut, the elm, the hemlock, and most recently, the ash. Each of those trees anchored natural ecosystems and human economies and cultures. While climate change and wildfires They grab all the headlines. Invasive species have so far proved to be a far greater threat to the forest biodiversity in the temperate world. An example is that the ash trees have been decimated by the emerald ash borer, an Asian beetle that first struck in suburban Detroit in the early 1990s. It has since killed hundreds of millions of trees and threatens some 16 known ash species native to the United States, plus the insect species that feed on them. And this is only one of so many similar examples. At Sylvamo, our entire business depends on the sustainability of forest. We provide an economic incentive for landowners to manage their forest responsibly through a continuous cycle of planting, managing, harvesting, and replanting trees. Edward Glaser, a professor of economics at Harvard University, once said, and I quote, "When people use more paper, suppliers plant more trees. If we want bigger commercial forests, well, then we should use more paper, not less. Our policies should directly protect important wildlife habitats, not to try to reduce our demand for paper," unquote. The fact is that when the demand for paper declines, landowner interest in tree farming also declines, taking all the important ecological impacts like clean water and wildlife habitat right along with it. So if you decide to decrease your use of paper, don't think you're going to save a tree. The reality is that decreasing paper usage may well have the opposite effect by creating a disincentive for landowners to actually maintain healthy working forests. To show you how Sylvamo sources fiber responsibly, if you drive up to the Adirondack Mountains in upstate New York, to the Ticonderoga Mill, which is located, of course, in Ticonderoga, New York, the average haul of wood for the mill comes from around 70 miles from the center of the mill, with a maximum of 150 miles. You would never know that wood was ever taken, as the forest around the mill looked full and natural. Today, every landowner harvests differently and manages their forest according to the site, geography, species, and objectives. But as an example, forest harvesters may treat their land in such a way as this. They may take trees 10 to 15 years old, but only take 1 out of 5, then plant 3 or more. For trees 15 to 35 years, they may take 1 out of 4, and again, replant 3 or more seedlings. It is good for the forest to take the older trees, which consume most of the air, sun, and nutrients. Taking the older trees allows the seedlings planted and the younger trees to better get the air, sun, and nutrients to grow. You know, every day the forest products industry plants more than 1.7 million trees in the U.S. today. There are 12 million more acres of forest in the U.S. than in 1987. So apparently the paper and paperboard are not killing trees after all. You know, Sylvamo is committed to ensuring healthy forest ecosystems. Sylvamo works with suppliers, contractors, private landowners, and other key stakeholders to advance sustainable forest management, combat illegal logging and deforestation, as well as support healthy working forests. Keep in mind that in the United States, private forest ownership represents almost 60% of all forest lands. Maintaining these forests as working forests provides advantages for the environment, local communities, and private landowners, as well as easing pressure on other public lands that may be better suited for conservation and/or recreation. I mentioned working forest earlier. So what the heck are working forests? That's easy. They are forests in which a continuous cycle of planting, managing, harvesting, and replanting can be repeated indefinitely. It's planting 3 trees for every one harvested. It's private landowners planting 4 million trees per day. It's responsibly harvesting trees for wood and paper products. It's managing the land for clean air and water, and for biodiversity. Sylvamo champions responsible forest management practices and third-party certifications, such as the Sustainability Forest Initiative, Forest Stewardship Council, and the new Print Relief Certification System. You know, to discuss those organizations would be a whole other episode and more. So, what's important here is for you and your clients to know that paper and paperboard produced from Sylvamo papers are not killing trees or destroying forests. Sylvamo sources their fiber from well-managed forests to ensure healthy and productive forests for future generations. Now, you can see in some cases how the times are changing. Two Sides North America, who once promoted the Go Paperless campaign years ago, has changed. As of February 2018, 100 North American companies have removed the Go Paperless, Go Green claims. Two Sides also notes that it is false to associate paper with deforestation in North America. Yep, the times are changing. I mentioned at the beginning of this episode how people blame paper for killing trees, but I've never heard anyone complain about toilet tissue or facial tissue killing trees. Seriously, I hope this episode has given you some insight on how paper and paperboard manufacturers such as Sylvamo, what they are doing to support healthy forest ecosystems. I know you're wondering about recycled paper, so according again to Two Sides, we have recovery rates up to about 73%, which is one of the most recycled materials. That's compared with around 29% and 3% for glass and plastic, respectively. Well, for Sylvamo Papers, I'm Jim Kohler, the Paper Professor, and be sure to subscribe to this channel so you get all the latest, past, and future episodes. And with that, I sure hope to see you in the next episode.